Hello, everybody. Um, Today's subject is the subject on price of freedom. Very interesting subject, and at the beginning, let me just thank you, all my subscribers, and above all, I thank you, Seppi, for giving me a bit of freedom and a bit of headache because I am doing this video on my own, and I've done millions of versions and positions, and the music didn't work, and my voice was cracked, and the whole thing. So this is my last attempt for today. As for a trauma person, this is a very much a big deal. I also want to thank Joanne for this beautiful book, which I'm going to quote with. This is Buddhist quotes for every day. Joanne is very much involved in Tibet and Tibetan Buddhist, and a wonderful lady. I opened this today, and here it comes, a lovely quote. A quote which is a Segal Rinpoche quote, which I will read it to you now. The ordinary mind is ceaselessly shifting and shiftless prey of external influences, habitual tendencies, and conditioning. The masters like it to the candle flame in an open doorway, vulnerable to all the winds of circumstances. Isn't that just a brilliant, absolutely brilliant quote on the subject of freedom? I also like to quote for you what Sigmund Freud talked about freedom in his book Civilization and its discontents. Most people do not really want freedom because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility. Isn't that interesting that most of us are frightened of responsibility? And I would add to that quote that many of us are childish, and our fear is also involved with the rage that we don't want to be responsible. I believe that escape to addiction is part of that, fixing our emotions and our reality in a different way, alternative to growth. So if I were to follow Sigmund Freud, I would say that responsibility is connected to acceptance of a reality. Painful as it may be, disconcerting, unaccepting, bewildering, we have to kind of go there. So we need to look at this price of freedom. Of course, there are various freedoms, political freedoms, economical freedoms, but I'm talking here about a freedom from maybe from ourselves as well. Another quote which I will read to you would be a quote of Lao Tzu, which is again a Chinese philosopher. Understand this, if nothing else. Spiritual freedom and oneness with the Tao are not randomly bestowed gifts, but the rewards of conscious self-transformation and self-evolution. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It's won by disregarding things that lies beyond our control. Lao Tzu and many Chinese, Taoists, Buddhists probably have a tremendous impact on its own people, because they seem to pay more attention to acceptance of reality rather than being saved by God, which might very often be a naive concept of reality. The Greek philosopher, many philosophers in Greece, modality often talk about freedom as the only goal worth having in life. And the acceptance of things which we have no control over is part of that freedom. So it is calling for price of releasing fantasy, or maybe, just maybe also releasing the ego, or working on maturing our ego and strengthening our ego, so we can then continuously be available to this transformative process and to that inner maybe freedom which is worth having. Gandhi always talk about freedom in a sense that he talks about not only freedom of accepting the reality, but also freedom to make mistakes. And that's a very interesting concept, because that means that we have to deal with our shame. Because shame will not allow us to be free, because we will not be able to make mistakes when we are shame-based or trauma-based, because mistakes bringing our humanity to our consciousness and our imperfection, limitation. So maybe one of the price of freedom is accepting that we are limited in every shape or form, and that we have to kind of live with that limitation. And that's probably a cause for a bit of more maturing process. Many modern thinkers and modern teachers would talk about freedom as a sort of limitless possibility, rather than being better anywhere, anytime. But that we are free, free to, the unfortunate interview of Meghan and Harry comes to mind, free to our own reality, to our own truth. And that kind of indulgence in that freedom, that concept of freedom. America is full of it, and of course the stars and glitz and Hollywood and all the kids who are enamored with those kind of messages are unfortunately going to be wandering for quite a while, because that responsibility as such, ability to respond, is not there. My truth. Often we have to really go into reflection rather than fight for my truth. This is much more infantile approach to freedom, or price of freedom, because there is no price. It's actually the sort of victim fighting for the existence without any price whatsoever. That might be an angry person, or indeed a shame-based person, trauma person, who is longing to be heard, to be seen, without any possibility of seeing another human being. They are not yet ready to have a real freedom. They are not paying the price. One of the things which I think, as far as emotions are concerned, is the fear. The fear will never make us free. So those three major emotions, fear, shame, anger, they're our prisons, and we need to deal with them. The fear is particularly powerful because we are subject to all sorts of scary stories, and almost a bamboozle to this kind of global kind of psychotic terror which we are experiencing now. This is, of course, affecting our immune system, our health, and our relationships. So fear is not really a good thing as far as subject of freedom is concerned. There is also an inherited situation which may not make us free, that inherited traumas of the family, or inherited shame, or inherited complex unresolved relationship in the past generations, which might passed to us, and it takes some reflection to see whether we can make ourselves a bit more free. Otherwise, we go into addiction, and as you know, addiction is kind of a shortcut to freedom. Any form of addiction, it's an escape. This is a kind of escape which will only enslave us; it never frees us. I think that tolerating pain is probably one of the things which will move us to more spiritual situation of understanding of freedom. How can we tolerate pain? Is pain useful? Because we perpetually want to have a painless life. And another thing which really can give us freedom is tolerating imperfections connect to the shame, not only our imperfections but imperfections of ours, imperfection of life. Full stop. And the more we go into a group, the more we are involved in the dynamic of many people. Those would be very apparent. Many people don't want to pay that price. They don't want to feel pain, or indeed transform pain, or find meaning in pain, which goes into a spiritual dimension. As one of my colleagues, Rokele Lerner, who did a very good lecture on narcissism, was saying, for many narcissists, the only thing which can help them is a major collapse and finding the spiritual growth. And it's through the Spirit, or as I call it as a Christian, through the Holy Spirit, we can actually achieve a lot of freedom. And we can grow, and we can reconcile how fighting for our space in a very narcissistic way is nothing to do with freedom, but actually to do a lot with control. And that is where we become maybe hugely split and quite diabolical and quite disturbing and quite disturbed. Maybe that would not give us any freedom. That is connected to the injuries in the childhood, and you know that one of the emotional price of freedom is actually working through those complexes, working through those parental voices, working through those internalized families and internalized villages. As Jung would put it, we must stop that civil war inside us. And because that would free us to relate better. I always say to people when they come working as a couple, remember that Freud very often stressed that you're not here sitting on your own. Behind you both, there are enormous amount of your inner villages and inner voices. So there are lots of ghosts in the room, and we need to maybe listen to those voices and see which one we can remove, which one we're willing to befriend. So I often say to myself and to others that maybe, just maybe, one of the real freedom is a freedom from the family complexes. That extends then to a national complexes, to religious freedom, and to maybe even moving forward to be free from the patriarchal system and to come to your essence, to your spirit, to your soul. So as a matter of fact can be useful and helpful, the same as dreams, as I mentioned in other videos. If we're frozen, if we are furious, if we are disturbed, we're not willing to, because we're surviving, to pay any price for freedom. We're not interested in it. We'd rather eat, we'd rather gamble, we'd rather sex, we'd rather drink, we'd rather take drugs, we'd rather take plastic surgeries, we'd rather dream about winning or making more millions. Those things would not give us freedom, and there's no price involved in that. Doing whatever we want, I want to be free, as the song goes, it's not actually freedom. It's being rebellious, it's being childish, and many people Nowadays, especially, we live in a culture of tremendous narcissistic kind of times, and everybody wants to be free and on their own terms. Actually, freedom in a social terms means accepting the group, accepting the laws of the group, being able to adapt, being able to compromise, being able to hear another. It's not doing what you want to do immediately, and it's not about just thinking about ourselves. Maybe really a price of freedom is exactly ability to communicate and to connect. If we're possessed, if we're in this kind of diabolical egomania, if we are sort of devilish, if we are not hearing anybody, that's not freedom. That's a huge and utter imprisonment. And risking this kind of spiritual growth will give us a slightly different position and probably journey, which will give us an internal freedom and space. If we refuse to accept reality, if we refuse to suffer, if we don't have any capacity to reflect, we are not going to be free. And we are going to be at the mercy of past repetition, complexes, archetypes, triggers. We will be all over the place. But that is the fact. That kind of almost satanic refusal of reality, or the egomania, would be a kind of shortcut to freedom. My law and not yours, yeah. My truth and not yours. I want to hear, and I want you all to hear my truth. We will go to the war. So we have that war inside us, and then we go to the war outside, and to the war in relationship. And that can effectively be, even if we are very religious or whatever, it doesn't mean that we are really going to this daily meditation or communication with our soul and really living in the terms of our spiritual responsibility. And as many people before me said, that our ultimate responsibility is to really work towards freedom, that physical sense and psychological sense, mental sense and spiritual sense. So in a sense, we have to be willing to let go of many things. In that cognitive behavioral sense, we have to recognize our belief system, core belief system, and maybe change them. And that is very difficult. We have to be willing to be reflected by others, and we have to be willing to really truly work on it. So I concluded that real, true spiritual freedom is probably the most valuable. Consciousness, as Jung put it, it's worth its weight in gold. And that is internal job. It always is. However much you look at it, the other freedoms, economical freedoms, financial freedom, it's an illusion, let's put this way. We don't want to transform. We don't want to be free, really, as Freud would put it. Because we believe that we're different and that we own by life, whatever, and that we don't need to do anything about it. So if we are to finish that spiritual freedom is the journey, that means we accept suffering. That means that it's a Christ consciousness or Buddha consciousness which matters, Tao consciousness. We have to let go of many things. We have to die a little to be born a little. We have to be less stony, as Rumi would put it. You've been stony for too many years. Try to surrender. Can we surrender? If we are using, if we escape, we're not going to surrender. So, freedom of that kind, it's a hard one. And that is the only freedom which nobody can take it away from us. It's not here to be taken away from us. So let me just quote at the end Erik Erikson, magnificent human being, who said it, and I quote, "There is freedom waiting for you on the breeze of the sky." And if you ask, what do I feel? You can say, oh, well, I am not going to really, truly bother to go to the sky. Erikson once said, and I continue with that, Erik Erikson's, the breeze of the sky, the freedom to be yourself, the freedom to be me. The freedom hard won, very expensive commodity. If other people don't understand our behavior, so what? The request that we must only do what they understand is intent to dictate to us. Mostly they resent our freedom and courage to be ourselves. Free person owns no explanation to anyone, only to himself, his reason and his consciousness. And that is true. Let's say serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Bye for now. I'm panicking because I lost my little thing. So I will just now try to turn it off.